He's had his chance, now it's my turn, her friend whispered while loading the final bag. I didn't react. 26 calls came in before I even got home. The suburbs of Seattle always felt like a compromise. Our modest two-story with its faded blue siding wasn't Sierra's dream home, but it was ours. 6 years into our marriage, I'd learned to navigate the delicate balance between what Sierra wanted and what her parents expected. Sierra, with her animated gestures and effortless charm, had always been my opposite. Where I calculated, she leapt. Where I planned, she improvised. It worked mostly. Victor and Darlene were fixtures at our Sunday dinners. Victor, a retired police captain with steel-gray hair and a perpetually furrowed brow, rarely spoke unless it was to recount some crime statistic or police anecdote. Darlene, his wife, would inevitably find something to criticize about the neighborhood, the food, or the weather. You know, the Hendersons just upgraded their kitchen granite countertops. Her favorite phrase was always some variation of, "We deserve the best." I spent 2 years of my life planning the perfect escape for all of us. 2 years of spreadsheet secret calls during lunch breaks and financial acrobatics, a dream, European vacation, Paris, Venice, Prague. 9 days of first-class flights, 5-star hotels with balcony views, private food tours through Tuscany, and a Seine River cruise at sunset. It would coincide with our anniversary and Darlene's 60th birthday. The perfect gift for the perfect family I desperately wanted to be part of. The details consumed me. I booked the first-class tickets 11 months in advance to secure promotional pricing. I researched hotels until I found ones with the exact amenities Sierra once mentioned she loved: rain showers, breakfast delivery, and French balconies. I even commissioned silk pouches with each person's name embroidered in silver thread, each containing their custom itinerary and a handwritten letter expressing what they meant to me. Then Noel started showing up. He'd been Sierra's best friend from college, now unemployed for over a year. A struggling musician, Sierra called him, just going through a rough patch. I'd come home to find coffee cups still warm on the counter, the faint scent of unfamiliar cologne in our living room. Once I accidentally opened Sierra's iPad to find half-deleted conversations, I chose silence, chose trust. Even when Sierra started inviting him to family dinners, I smiled and made extra portions. The night everything changed. Sierra had texted me to meet them at her parents' place. Just a quick outing. She'd written, "Nothing fancy." When I pulled into Victor and Darlene's driveway, the scene sliced through me like a serrated blade. Noel stood on the front steps, his jacket unzipped despite the cold, a rolling suitcase at his feet. 3 more matching suitcases were lined up by the garage door. Sierra bounced on her heels, grinning as though this were the most natural thing in the world. "Noel's been having such a rough time," she said, her voice light. "He really needs this break. We all agreed he should take your spot. I knew you'd understand." I couldn't breathe. Victor stood behind them, arms crossed, eyes focused, somewhere over my left shoulder. Darlene gave me a cursory glance and a slight nod as though I were dropping off a package rather than having my heart carved out. Noel offered a small smile and a nod, the kind you give to service workers. Somehow, I maintained control. I lifted Noel's suitcase into the trunk, my movements mechanical. As he brushed past me to climb into the back seat, I noticed the leather bracelet on his wrist, the one I'd bought for Sierra during our weekend in Portland. Before closing the trunk, I spotted the silk pouch with Sierra's name embroidered on it. I'd planned to give it to her that night, a preview of what was coming. Instead, I removed the letter, tore it in half, and slipped the pieces into my pocket. The tickets, I left them. Let's see if they could actually use them without me. Victor's hulking black SUV felt like a coffin. I gripped the steering wheel, guiding us through Seattle's evening traffic while they laughed in the back seat. The sound of their excitement was a dull roar in my ears, occasionally pierced by specific words that cut deeper than others. The garlic butter escargot at that little place off the Champs-Élysées. Sierra was saying, her voice animated, "Everyone says it's to die for." Darlene chimed in, flipping through something on her phone. "I've made a list of boutiques near our hotel, Louis Vuitton, obviously. But there's this little place for scarves that my friend Diane recommended." Noel had his legs stretched out, AirPods in, occasionally whistling along to whatever he was listening to. His casual comfort in what should have been my seat, my trip, my life, made my stomach turn. No one asked if I needed directions to the airport. No one wondered if I was okay driving back alone. I didn't exist in this journey. I was just the chauffeur for their grand adventure. 2 years of sacrifice flashed before me. 2 years of turning down Miles's annual fishing trip to Canada because I needed to save every penny. 2 years of selling my company's stock at its peak to secure the down payment for first-class tickets. 2 years of pushing project deadlines, earning a formal warning from my manager because I was busy finalizing bookings during work hours. For what? So I could drive them to the airport and watch them leave without me. Each smile they exchanged was another slash to my heart. Every excited comment about Parisian cafes or Venetian canals was salt in an open wound. I felt my knuckles turn white against the steering wheel. Despite the cool 60-degree evening sweat dampened the back of my shirt, my body reacting to the emotional assault, even as my face remained carefully blank, I said nothing. Not a single word during the entire 40-minute drive. I needed this silence to think, to plan, to take back control of a game I didn't know I was playing until I'd already lost. When we reached the airport drop-off zone, Noel was the first one out. He popped the trunk and retrieved his suitcase with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Maybe with her on trips I never knew about. Sierra leaned forward from the back seat and kissed my cheek. A quick, impersonal peck, like you'd give a distant relative or a rideshare driver. Thanks for being so understanding, she said, her eyes already focused on the terminal entrance. You really are the best. Victor grabbed Darlene's luggage, giving me nothing but a slight smirk and a nod. No thanks for the tickets, the planning, the driving. No acknowledgement of what was happening. Just complicity wrapped in silence. I watched them walk away, 4 figures growing smaller against the airport's glass facade. I didn't drive off immediately. I couldn't. My brain was spinning faster than the wheels of their rolling suitcases. I pulled away from the curb, robotically driving in silence. No music, no air conditioning. Despite the stuffiness in the cabin, just the sound of my own breathing. Growing more controlled with each mile, I didn't head home. Instead, I pulled into a nearly empty gas station about a mile from the airport, parked in the far corner of the lot, and took out my phone. The travel app opened with a cheerful ping that felt obscene given the circumstances. I navigated to the My Trips tab. The screen displayed, check-in complete, departure from Seattle to Paris, 1805. My finger hovered over the Manage Booking button, then tapped it gently. The cancellation option appeared bold red against the white background. I didn't press it. Not yet. I smiled coldly at my own reflection in the phone screen. I wanted them to actually take off before I pulled the ground out from under them. Let them order their first glass of champagne in first class. Let them settle in. Let them think they'd won. Then I would show them what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. I remained in that gas station parking lot until exactly 6:05 p.m., refreshing the flight tracker every few minutes. The screen finally flashed the update I was waiting for. Flight AF069 departed. They were officially airborne champagne flutes, probably already clinking somewhere over Washington state. I switched my phone to airplane mode, started the engine, and drove home in silence. The entire trip felt like a funeral procession, slow, deliberate, heavy with finality. I was burying something: my trust, my naivety, perhaps the man I used to be. The house was eerily quiet when I arrived at 7:03 p.m. I flipped on a single lamp in the living room, leaving the rest of the space in darkness. It matched my mood. This home suddenly felt hollow, its soul ripped out along with my place in that vacation. I opened my laptop at the kitchen table and logged into the travel management system. The screen glowed blue-white in the dimness, illuminating my face as I methodically began dismantling their dream vacation piece by piece. First-class round-trip tickets for 4. Canceled. Refund to be processed to my primary account within 3-5 business days. 5-star hotel booking in Paris. Canceled, non-refundable first-night deposit forfeited, but I didn't care. Worth every penny Tuscan culinary tour with private chef. Canceled Prague river cruise with chamber music. Canceled private car service throughout all 3 cities. Canceled. Within 15 minutes, my inbox filled with 9 separate cancellation confirmation emails, each one a small victory. I changed all passwords on the booking accounts and revoked Sierra's secondary access privileges, which I'd granted her to make check-in easier. I wasn't finished. I logged into our banking app and closed the joint secondary account we maintained, transferring all $24,500 to my private account. I changed the PIN on my credit card and blocked Sierra's supplementary card that she'd been using for vacation shopping. Once the digital dismantling was complete, I called Miles Rayner. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, what's up? Aren't you supposed to be packing for Europe? They took Noel instead of me." I explained everything in clipped, emotionless sentences. A long whistle came through the speaker. "Holy shit, man. I just canceled everything. The whole trip while they're in the air." Miles let out a bark of laughter. "Bro, you're doing what thousands of spineless husbands only dream of doing. Keep going." I cracked open a beer and scrolled through the list of canceled items, satisfaction spreading through me with each sip. The feeling was precise, methodical, like diffusing a bomb wire by wire. 14 hours later, at 12:18 p.m. The next day, my phone erupted with notifications. Darlene's voicemail came first, her voice pitched higher than usual. "The hotel says our reservation doesn't exist. They're saying it was canceled. Call them immediately." Sierra's text was furious. "Why is the hotel saying our reservation was canceled? There must be a system error fix." Noel's contribution was brief. "Bro, not cool." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I opened my journal and wrote, "They're falling from clouds to mud. No safety net." 4 hours later, the panic escalated. An email from the travel agency reported that clients claim booking does not exist at the Rome hotel. Sierra tried video calling repeatedly. I didn't answer, but I could see the thumbnail preview Noel, with his head in his hands on what looked like a street curb. Victor, red-faced and gesturing wildly, Sierra's face contorted with rage. They couldn't make alternative arrangements because all the services had been tied to my account. None of them had brought international credit cards with sufficient limits. Why would they need to when I had taken care of everything? I was deleting Sierra's 12th text message when a new email notification appeared. Updated account balance, 28,982.40. I smiled as the refunds began rolling in. The doorbell rang, startling me slightly. Miles stood on my porch, a 12-pack of beer dangling from one hand. "Open your laptop," he said with a grin as I let him in. "I want to see how much they're squirming by now." 2 days after canceling everything, my phone became a war zone. Sierra's video calls came in relentless waves, first hourly, then every 20 minutes as desperation set in. I let them ring through to voicemail, each missed call another small victory in my silent battle. At 11:40 p.m., while writing in my journal about the day's developments, I finally decided to answer. The screen flickered to life, revealing a scene that looked nothing like the luxury European vacation they'd envisioned. Sierra's face appeared pale and drawn, her usually perfect hair disheveled. Behind her, Darlene sat hunched on what looked like a park bench, scowling at something off-screen. Noel was slumped over, head resting on a stone table, seemingly half asleep. Sierra's first words weren't, "How are you?" or even "Why?" Instead, she launched straight into accusation. "Have you completely lost your mind?" She practically spat the words, "canceling everything like that. Do you have any idea how humiliated we've been?" I kept my voice eerily calm, which I knew would infuriate her more than any shouting match. "I doubt your humiliation compares to mine," I replied. "You kicked me off a trip I spent 2 years planning, then expected me to foot the bill while you paraded around Paris with your ex on my dime. He's not my ex, he's a friend." Sierra shot back, her voice rising. I couldn't help but laugh, a cold, bitter sound that surprised even me. A friend. "Since when do you sleep with friends?" Her eyes widened. She stood up abruptly, the camera view swinging wildly for a moment. The sudden movement roused Noel, who blinked groggily into consciousness. He spotted me on the screen but said nothing, his eyes darting away as if trying to avoid any direct acknowledgement of what was happening. "You're being selfish and cruel," Sierra hissed. "You've made everyone miserable." "And what about you?" I countered. "I spent 2 years planning this trip and you cut me out without a second thought. Now you're demanding my understanding." Darlene seized the phone from Sierra. her face filling the screen. "You've embarrassed us in front of the French," she shrieked. "We were turned away from the hotel lobby at midnight. You owe us an apology." I felt a strange calm settle over me as I stared at her entitled rage. This woman who had never once thanked me for the countless dinners I'd cooked, gifts I'd given, or efforts I'd made to be accepted into their family. "I owe you." I repeated slowly, savoring each word. "No, you owe me 2 years of my youth and a betrayed heart." I ended the call mid-protest, setting my phone face down on the table. The next day, Miles came over with his laptop in tow. I showed him everything. The cancellation emails, voice recordings of Darlene's increasingly desperate voicemails, screenshots of the video call from the night before. Miles collapsed into my couch, laughing, tears streaming down his face. "You didn't just get revenge," he wheezed. "You murdered their dream with a smile." He suggested I print out all the receipts and cancellation notices and hang them on my wall like trophies. Instead, I grabbed a dry erase marker and wrote on the whiteboard in my home office, "The price of betrayal, 2 years, 1 soul, 1 trip of no return." The messages continued to pour in, each more desperate than the last. From Noel, "We're stuck in a 1-star hostel with no hot water. Someone stole €60 from me in the shared bathroom." From Darlene, "The return flights are canceled too. How are we supposed to get home?" From Sierra, "If you have any conscience at all, you'll send money." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I printed each message and added it to a growing folder I'd labeled Memoirs of Betrayal, Volume 1. The physical act of archiving their desperation gave me a strange sense of closure. That evening, I sat at my desk, staring at my computer screen. My fingers moved almost of their own accord, typing out an email with the subject line, "Next trip, for me alone." In the search box of the travel website, I typed "solo backpacking in Rome." As I scrolled through the results, simple hostels, walking tours, authentic local experiences, I felt my face change. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was smiling. Not the tight, controlled smile I wore at Sierra's family dinners. Not the polite smile I gave her friends when they clearly wished I wasn't there. This was real. This was mine. The flight tracking app confirmed they'd be landing back in Seattle on Sunday evening. After almost 2 weeks of international humiliation, they were finally coming home. I could have ignored them completely, let them slink back to their lives without ever having to face me. That would have been the easier path. But something inside me demanded closure. A final scene to end this chapter properly. I didn't announce my intentions. No warning texts, no heads-up calls. I wanted to see their faces when they weren't prepared, when they couldn't rehearse their lines or coordinate their stories. I wanted raw truth. I arrived at Victor and Darlene's suburban home an hour before their expected arrival. The well-manicured lawn and perfectly trimmed hedges looked exactly as they had 2 weeks ago when I'd loaded their suitcases into the SUV. Everything was the same, yet nothing was. I sat on the porch steps, sipping from a travel mug of black coffee, wearing the same worn navy jacket I'd had on when I dropped them at the airport. A deliberate callback to the moment everything changed. The neighborhood was quiet, just the occasional dog walker or jogger passing by, giving me curious glances but saying nothing. I must have looked strange, this motionless man waiting on someone else's porch like a sentinel, or maybe like an executioner. At 7:42 p.m., a white Toyota Camry with an Uber sticker pulled into the driveway. I didn't stand. I didn't wave. I simply watched my coffee cup warming my palms against the evening chill. Sierra emerged first, barely recognizable from the confident woman who'd left 2 weeks ago. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. None of the usual careful styling. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her complexion had a grayish cast to it. She wore what looked like the same clothes she'd departed in, only now wrinkled and travel-worn. When she saw me, she froze mid-step, 1 foot still in the car. Darlene came next, struggling to pull her oversized suitcase from the trunk. Her designer outfit, likely intended for elegant Parisian dinners, was rumpled beyond salvation. Her face was pinched with barely contained fury and humiliation. The woman who'd always insisted on the finer things looked like she'd been dragged backward through a discount department store. Noel emerged, looking worst of all. His leather jacket, the one Sierra had given him last Christmas, was stained and damp along one side. His suitcase had a long scrape across its formerly pristine surface. His posture was hunched, defeated, a far cry from the confident man who'd whistled in the back seat on the way to the airport. Victor was the last to exit, moving slowly, deliberately. Unlike the others, he didn't seem surprised to see me. His eyes darted away when I looked directly at him, a man carrying the weight of his own complicity. For several long moments, nobody spoke. The only sound was the Uber driver popping the trunk shut and pulling away, leaving them stranded in my silence. Sierra recovered first, her voice sharp with accusation. "Do you have any idea what you've done to us?" she demanded. "Do you know how much face we lost?" When I didn't immediately respond, she continued, words tumbling out like water from a broken dam. "Noel had to sleep on a park bench for 2 nights. Darlene had an allergic reaction to the cheap hostel bedding. We were thrown out of the hotel lobby at midnight when they told us our reservation didn't exist." Darlene stepped forward, her designer luggage abandoned on the driveway. "I cannot believe you would treat us this way," she said, her voice trembling with indignation. "We are your family." That word family ignited something cold and precise inside me. I spoke for the first time, my voice calm and measured. "I don't treat my family this way," I said. "My family chose to cut me out of a trip I spent 2 years building from nothing." I stood, finally looking directly at each of them in turn. "For 2 years, I lived like an ant, carrying crumbs, saving every penny, planning every detail, and you all stepped on me like roadside trash." I turned to Sierra, meeting her eyes fully. "And you chose Noel, a man who couldn't afford a movie ticket, and you handed him my dream vacation." My voice didn't waver. "I didn't abandon you. You removed me from your life long before this." The words hung in the evening air between us. Sierra's face flushed crimson, tears welling in her eyes. But for once she had no comeback, no explanation. Darlene inhaled sharply, about to launch into what would undoubtedly be another self-righteous tirade, when Victor placed a hand on her shoulder. It was the first time I'd seen him intervene in any family disagreement. "Brandon," he said, his voice gravelly with what might have been shame. "I won't deny it. I let this go too far." That was it. No apology. No real acknowledgement of his role. Just the barest admission that something had gone wrong. From Victor, it was practically a confession. Noel hadn't said a word. He stood with his hand clenched around his suitcase handle. Lips pressed tightly together, unable to meet my gaze or anyone else's. I finished my coffee in one last swallow, then stood up. My voice was steady as I delivered my final thoughts. "I came here today to tell you one thing: don't ever call me family again." I looked at each of them in turn. The people I'd spent 6 years trying to please, trying to belong with. Those who betray will live with the consequences. As for me, I'm doing just fine. I walked to my car without looking back. No one called after me. No one followed. The silence behind me was the sound of a chapter closing. As I opened my car door, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A text message from Sierra, just 3 words. "This isn't over." I turned off the screen, started the engine, and muttered to myself as I pulled away from the curb, "No, it just ended." In the weeks that followed, I systematically removed their presence from my life. I blocked Sierra's calls, filtered her emails to a folder I never opened, and returned packages she sent unopened. The first 72 hours were the hardest moments, when muscle memory had me reaching for my phone to text her about something trivial, or when I'd catch myself wondering what she was doing. But like a withdrawal from any addiction, the symptoms began to fade. I needed something physical to occupy my hands and mind. The weathered shed in the backyard had been Sierra's designated eyesore since we bought the house. "We'll tear it down eventually," she'd always say. Instead, I decided to reclaim it. I started by gutting the interior, ripping out rotted drywall and sweeping decades of dust and cobwebs. I replaced the broken window, installed proper insulation, and ran electrical lines from the main house. Each evening after work, I'd spend 3 or 4 hours transforming the space. The repetitive tasks of measuring, cutting, sanding, and painting became a meditation. I built bookshelves from reclaimed oak, installed a vintage writing desk I found at a thrift store, added a comfortable chair and a small wood stove for the coming winter. The shed became my sanctuary, a place Sierra had never entered, never influenced, never tainted with her presence. I started writing daily in a leather-bound journal Miles had given me. "For your rebirth story," he'd said with a grin. Each entry began as therapy, a catalog of hurt and betrayal, but gradually transformed into something more reflective, an examination of who I'd been and who I wanted to become. I realize now I've been performing a role for 6 years. I wrote one evening, the perfect son-in-law, the accommodating husband, the eternal background character in the Sierra show. I relearned how to cook for one, experimenting with recipes I'd always wanted to try, but Sierra had vetoed. I slept in the middle of the bed. I played music at whatever volume I wanted. The house felt different, not empty, but honest. There were no forced smiles, no pretended interest in Darlene's country club gossip, no silent suffering through Victor's thinly veiled criticisms, just me and the authentic quiet of a space that was finally my own. On a crisp October morning, I made a decision. The airline refunds had all processed, leaving my account with a healthy balance that had originally been earmarked for someone else's happiness. I opened my laptop and booked a flight to Rome economy class, one-way departing in 2 weeks. Not the luxury trip I'd planned for others, but something far more valuable. Freedom, I packed light. Just an old backpack with a few changes of clothes, my journal, and a guidebook. I booked a bed in a hostel near the center of Rome, the kind of place Sierra would have sneered at for its basic accommodations. Rome greeted me with golden autumn sunshine and the chaotic symphony of motorbike street vendors and animated conversations. No scheduled tours, no luxury cars waiting at the airport. I found my way to the hostel via public bus, stumbling through rudimentary Italian phrases with the driver. The first day, I simply walked, hours of aimless wandering through ancient streets, each turn revealing something unexpected. I sat on the stone steps of Piazza Navona, eating a slice of pizza folded in paper, watching street musicians play for coins. A family of American tourists passed the mother, frantically checking a detailed itinerary, the father shepherding sullen teenagers who were more interested in their phones than the Renaissance marvel before them. I recognized my old self in their stressed expressions, the anxiety of making sure everything went perfectly according to plan. At Trevi Fountain, I watched tourists toss coins over their shoulders, making wishes as they had for centuries. An elderly Italian woman noticed me standing apart from the crowds. "Non fai un desiderio?" she asked. "Aren't you making a wish?" I shook my head. "Non ho bisogno di desideri. Ho già quello che mi serve." I don't need wishes. I already have what I need. My broken Italian made her smile, and she patted my arm before continuing on her way. That night in the hostel common room, I purchased a small notebook bound in soft Roman leather. On the first page I wrote, "I am no longer the man who stands behind the camera." It was time to stop documenting other people's experiences and start living my own. I filled the notebook with observations, the specific sweetness of nocciola gelato melting in the afternoon sun, the distinctive growl of Vespa engines echoing off ancient walls, fragmented conversations with locals who welcomed a solo traveler with genuine warmth rather than the practiced smiles of those catering to wealthy tourists. Every step I took on those cobblestone streets felt like a counterpunch against years of being undervalued. I was reclaiming not just my present, but erasing the indignity of my past with each new authentic experience. When I returned to Seattle 3 weeks later, I discovered Sierra had tried accessing our joint account multiple times. The attempted withdrawals had been denied, but her persistence was telling. I visited the bank that afternoon and closed the account, entirely transferring my portion to a new bank where she had no history or connections. I blocked Noel's number and removed every digital trail that might lead back to them. Sierra's emails arrived like clockwork. The first was a rambling narrative of their suffering in Europe, a detailed account of sleeping in budget hostels, eating at disgusting street food stands, and the humiliation of having to borrow money from other American tourists. The second attempted a vague apology filled with, "I never meant to hurt you, and we were just trying to help Noel through a difficult time." The third demanded an explanation. "I deserve to know why you would do something so cruel and vindictive." I replied to only the last one, a single line. Explain it to yourself. I already understand everything. One rainy afternoon in November, I found a plain white envelope in my mailbox. Victor's precise handwriting addressed it simply with my name. No return address, though I knew immediately who it was from. The letter inside was brief, written on what looked like hotel stationery. We didn't just lose a son-in-law. We lost the only man who ever truly respected this family. No apology. No request for forgiveness. Just a belated acknowledgement of what had been squandered. I placed the letter in my desk drawer, neither burning it nor responding. I needed nothing more from them. That evening I sat in my completed shed conversion, the warm yellow light from a vintage lamp illuminating the open page of my journal. I wrote, "I used to be the last person chosen. Now I choose myself first." On my desk sat three things: a bottle of Italian wine I'd brought back from Rome, a photo of a gelato shop where I'd spent an afternoon talking with the elderly owner about his family's recipes, and a printed airline confirmation for my next solo journey, Kyoto, during the autumn leaf season. The man who had driven a car full of betrayers to the airport no longer existed. In his place stood someone who had reclaimed his life not through loud vengeance or dramatic confrontation, but by simply withdrawing his service. The betrayers had lost both their privileges and their hold on me, left to wrestle with the emptiness they had created. There had been no bloody revenge, no screaming matches, no dramatic public exposure. Instead, it had been a silent, devastating blow, the kind that only a truly decent person pushed too far could deliver. The kind that leaves the recipients with nothing to fight against except the consequences of their own actions.